Hey world, what up? We're gonna kick it back here in the NBA, falling alongside the Houston Rockets and Mr. James Harden. Usually, every season, there's always that main character, that main player that everyone in the media has their eye on, either for trade rumors or free agency. Free agency, we've seen LeBron James a couple of times, Kevin Durant in free agency, the trade rumors of Anthony Davis, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler. But now we're in the phase of here in the 2021 NBA season. When it comes to free agency, everyone has their eye on Giannis Antetokounmpo, and when it comes to beginning of trade rumors, they have the All-Star. They got their eye on James Harden. So whenever it comes to James Harden right now, he has been a member of the Houston Rockets for around 8 seasons or so. He's been to the conference finals 2 seasons. He got to a game 7 in 2018. Chris Paul was hurt the last 2 games, but you can make the case because Iguodala was hurt with the Warriors, but they folded. They missed 27 threes in a row. The Rockets lost on their home court, and James Harden he blew around 2 games to where they were up 13 points in Game 6 and Game 7. So that's kind of on him. But now this has been the downtrend for the Houston Rockets. The Russell Westbrook experiment did not work. You pretty much gave away 6 to 5 first-round picks in that CP3 Houston Rockets and Russell Westbrook trade. Yet Russell Westbrook, they got bounced in the second round to the LA Lakers, who eventually went on to win the championship. Now that you're the Houston Rockets, small ball didn't work. You had Mike D'Antoni. He's out of there. He decided to leave to go to be an assistant coach in Brooklyn. You brought in new head coach Steven Silas, who was an assistant for the Dallas Mavericks. And I don't think any players are really too fond of him, especially James Harden. Russell Westbrook, he demanded a trade. They shipped him off, and you pretty much got a swip for John Wall. And you got Boogie Cousins who came in. So these Houston Rockets are a way different team. You still have the core foundation of Harden, Eric Gordon, and PJ Tucker still on the franchise. But besides from that, you traded Robert Covington away. And you're in a peculiar situation. James Harden pretty much is done with the Rockets. I know he would like to stay, but he wants to now go chase a ring. Either if that's with Brooklyn, Philadelphia, the Miami Heat, somewhere that's a contender in the Eastern Conference. And number one on the list for James Harden, which makes both sense, would be the Philadelphia 76ers with Daryl Morey on the other side. Basically, there's been tactics of James Harden not attending practices, skipping individual workouts late at night, and going to strip clubs and bar centers. So the league has their eye on James Harden right now, who is somewhat imploding during this news of Russell Westbrook being traded, of him pretty much wanting to leave because he knows the writing's on the wall to where he can't be a number one option in Houston to win the championship. And even though the management, they brought in Boogie Cousins and John Wall to quote-unquote keep James Harden, that's not going to be good enough. So we're going to dive a little more deeper here into Undisputed on FS1 with Skip and Shannon. And they'll dive a little more deeper in here, and I'll give my take on this.
Holding out.
It's Kim. The Rockets have done everything they possibly could in their power. Skip, they've mortgaged off their future in draft assets, trying to get James Harden a ring. Even though after
trying to get themselves a ring,
but they did everything they did. They consulted James Harden. Mm-hmm. There was not one player that came into that organization that James Harden was not consulted on. Mm-hmm. Okay, they went and got him a big in Dwight Howard. He and Dwight Howard couldn't make it. Dwight Howard says, nah, later for this. Forget this one-on-one. I can still play basketball. They got CP3 and gave up all their draft assets to trade CP3 for Russell Westbrook. They got Clint Capella. They got rid of Clint Capella. Skip, they've done everything for James Harden. Even after great said, look, if James Harden wants to try to win a championship, that style of play isn't conducive.
Well, real quickly, let me step in on here, Mr. Shannon Sharp. Whenever James Harden came to the Houston Rockets, Daryl Morey saw star potential in him. They brought Dwight Howard to be the quote-unquote second star to James Harden his second season. That Dwight Howard and James Harden experiment for the first 2 to 3 seasons, it was fine. You had Kevin McHale as your head coach, who played more of a traditional playmaking style play. James Harden did not have a high ball usage as we've seen as of right now. You got to remember, James Harden was a 2. You pretty much had Jason Terry as your 1 during that time. So Harden pretty much didn't hog the ball as much. He played more in a team system. And they had Dwight at the 5. And at the 4, they would have like Josh Smith or Terrence Jones. So it was more traditional, that type of play with Kevin McHale. Basically, what I'm saying is the Dwight Howard and James Harden situation was somewhat of a success. They did make a conference finals appearance, which the Houston Rockets back then, no one really batted an eye too much on them. 2015, they came out of nowhere because the Rockets lost Dwight Howard for around 50 to 60 games that season, and James Harden propelled the Rockets to a second seed, to where him and Steph Curry were top two in MVP win votes. I think the James Harden and Dwight Howard situation was fine, as Harden was around, like 24, 25. He was very young, and they made a conference finals appearance. But later after that, they had to let go of Kevin McHale, Dwight Howard to get out of there, and they had to bring in Mike D'Antoni, and they had to bring more of a small ball, more shooters around James Harden, switch the game up. The CP3 and James Harden experiment was not a failure. It was a success. The first season, most people predicted it would be a mess because James Harden and Chris Paul are pretty much point guards, that they would never mesh together. They got pretty much a 66-16 record or 65-17 record. Number one seed, best in the NBA in 2018. Harden won his first MVP, and they made Game 7 to the conference finals. Again, Chris Paul got hurt the last two games. But besides from that, you brought in Russell Westbrook. That was a little more forced situation. But I don't want to hear too much on it's all James Harden, his fault. James Harden lost in the last 6 seasons in the playoffs. 4 of those 5 times were against the dynasty of the Golden State Warriors. And James Harden had some great series against them, but at the end of the day, he lost to those dynasty. If those Warriors were never there, James Harden would have 2 finals appearances, being the number 1 option in Houston. Last season, I expected the Lakers to win the championship, so the Rockets folded a little bit. But basically what I'm saying is, I don't want to hear too much Harden's a failure. He is not. That's a notion that is overtaken.
Guess what? He was unwilling to change. And now, Skip, his mom says, well, I want to, all he asked for was a trade. Anybody could want that, Skip. If James Harden thinks that style, even the great Michael Jordan couldn't win a championship with that style of play. The great Kobe Bryant, the 2 offensive guys, Skip, that game come to mind when you talk about offense, could not win championships with that style of play. Kobe even told James that you can't win a championship dominating the ball like you dominated.
Now, I would say this, and Harden was close to winning a championship playing that same play, that same style. 2019, he cranked it up even more whenever he was just bringing up the ball, 20 seconds dribbling, step back 3, falling on the ground. That was too much. But if James Harden were to go, for example, if he would be going to the Brooklyn Nets, and let's just say Kyrie Irving was out of there and it was just KD and James Harden, he can play that same style of play, that same isolation ball, and he could win a championship based off those two together. If he went to the Philadelphia 76ers, that can guarantee him a conference finals appearance playing that way with Joel Embiid. But at the end of the day, James Harden does have a hard head. He has a huge ego, which I can't fault him too much on that. He is young. Now he's entering his 30s. I think he's just turned 30 here a little bit ago. So now this is the day and age where you have star players start to humble themselves, and they'll either take on a second option role, they'll leave to another team, or as well as take a lesser role and sacrifice a bit. James Harden is in that bubble area to where he's about to do so. That's why he's looking to go either to the Brooklyn Nets or the Philadelphia 76ers. If he goes to the 76ers, he could still be a number 1 guy and kind of play the same way for another season or 2. But if he's looking to go to the Nets, for example, he's going to have to take that sacrifice. I think James Harden is somewhat realizing that as of right now. I don't think he's going to be able to let it go until he's 32. So as of right now, I expect James Harden to stay with the Rockets, or if anything, get traded to the 76ers and still be a number 1 option for another year or 2.
No, we can do it. We can do it. Skip, Daryl Morey got rid of every big. Basically, they're going out there like a college team. 6-7 and under, it's like a 6-7 league and under for James Harden to try to win. And now, you over there, you out there all out there with Lil Baby in the A, gifted Lil Baby, Richard Needle, and, Dior and cars and all that. You all in Vegas. But I tell you what, he ain't gonna miss no check. Now, I'm gonna find him. Now, I don't know what the max the Rockets can find him, but I'm taking that paper. And I don't believe now James Harden probably making, $40 million a year? There's a good likelihood, and if I'm not mistaken, the NBA, they play their players, like most people, twice a month. I don't think you're going to miss no checks. But I'm telling you what, every day you don't show up, whatever the max I can find you through the CBA, Skip, I'm going to get that. And I ain't giving it back to you when you show up. I'm not going to let you hold me hostage. Now, we entered into agreement. The one thing about the NBA, Skip, and MLB, contract guaranteed. That money guaranteed. Everybody, you see, Anthony Davis said the reason why I took this long-term deal is because of my injury history. That way I'm protected. James Harden protected for another 2 years, Skip Bayless. I'm not trading him unless I get maximum. Brooklyn, you want it? KD or Kyrie plus a couple of other players. I'm not taking, you're not finna get me with no jelly beans. It's about, I give you all these jelly beans. You just give me the big.
You know, there's been rumors that James Harden can be traded for like Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, and some picks from the Brooklyn Nets. That's not going to happen at all whatsoever. The Rockets are not going to make a trade for a superstar for those pieces. They're nice young pieces, but I'm not gonna entertain that conversation whatsoever. If you're going to trade James Harden away, the only best trade scenario that makes sense by rebuilding and having a young star would be swapping him to the 76ers for Ben Simmons. It's very straightforward, nothing too much on that. The 76ers have Daryl Morey. They'll get their star in James Harden to where they can push to make the finals, let alone win a championship. And if you're the Houston Rockets, you understand the Western Conference is growing. It is stacked. Younger teams are now entering the playoffs. The Rockets are on the downhill, if anything. So trade away James Harden now. You had your 8-year run with him. It's just a timetable and a momentum type thing. That's just how it is. Get him out of there, bring in Ben Simmons, and rebuild. They messed up because they brought in John Wall and Boogie Cousins. So I expect the Houston Rockets, they really want to hold on tight to James Harden. And I actually expect that to happen to where they'll keep him for one last season. They're not going to make a trade with the Brooklyn Nets. It makes zero sense. The Miami Heat are not interested because they're looking at Giannis Antetokounmpo in free agency. And with the 76ers, the GM for the Rockets already stated he's not trading James Harden to Philadelphia. You do have Daryl Morey over there in Philadelphia, so they don't want to let Harden go over there. So that kind of leads me, I feel like this is going to be like the Anthony Davis situation in 2019 to where he's demanding trades and he sat out a couple games through quote-unquote injury, and he's just playing that season. I think the same thing will go with the Houston Rockets and James Harden. So we're pretty much going to see a lineup of keeping Harden of John Wall at your 1, Harden at the 2. At the 3, you're probably going to have either Daniel House or Eric Gordon. At the 4, you're either going to have Christian Wood or PJ Tucker. And then at the 5, most likely DeMarcus Cousins. Somewhere in that lineup, you do have Steven Silas. I think James Harden is going to pout when he's on that season with that team. It's going to be somewhat chaotic. Kind of like the same thing with the Pelicans when they had Anthony Davis not wanting to be there. But at the end of the day, I don't see the Houston Rockets trading him to Brooklyn. I would be appalled and I'll be shocked if that happened. And the other team out there is the 76ers, which they don't want to trade him there because of Daryl Morey. I'm kind of shocked that the Boston Celtics haven't tried to throw their name out there to trade him for like Kemba Walker and Jaylen Brown and some young pieces and draft picks. But Danny Ainge never really pulls the trigger, so I'm not shocked.
Beanstalk. Oh, no.
I don't think Karis LeVert qualifies as a jelly bean.
So is he James Harden?
No.
Okay, what about Spencer Dinwiddie? Is he James Harden?
No, but they're pretty good players.
Skip.
They're not jelly beans.
Pretty good players does not win you titles. Superstars win you titles. So which one of those superstars are you willing to get off of to get James?
You got to remember, and I've stated this, the last chance for James Harden to be a number 1 option and win the championship was in 2018. And then 2019, he had a chance as well. But the best chance was 2018, and they blew it. Now, Harden really needs to be a second option. And for sure, he'd be a second option to win a championship. But he's still going to hold on to trying to be a number 1 option for the next year or 2. So it is what it is.
Harden, Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving, Brooklyn, do we have a deal? Oh, we don't, huh? Okay, well, keep it moving. Kick rocks.
Okay, allow me to start with the fact that in the business you and I are in right now, I grew up in this business being taught that a contract is a contract.
Correct.
No ifs, no ands, no buts, no way out.
Right.
Okay? A deal is a deal.
Right.
Taught that since I was a little kid. This league, the rules are different because the players have slowly but surely taken over this league.
Thanks to who? Thanks to who? Give my guy credit.
Thanks to the GOAT, James. Hey, for real though, back in the NBA for the last couple of decades, we've always seen upper management have the edge on players. Now players have really taken into a part with them and their agents. They have the leverage. They can sign one-year deals. They can take max money. They can request a trade wherever they want to go. They can do as they please. That's why upper management right now, they're on their toes. Agents and players. We've seen now with Paul George and Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard, they've demanded trades within the season, and they demanded a list of teams or one team. And that puts the other teams and franchises and management on the edge. And it's worked out successfully. Anthony Davis won a championship. He went to the Lakers. Kawhi Leonard demanded a trade. He actually went somewhere way different than he expected. But he won a championship with the Toronto Raptors. So it's been successful. And we'll keep it at that same way. With James Harden, it's still going to be successful even for him. If he ends up on the Nets, the Heat, the 76ers, or who knows where. But it was still going to work out.
Will, because he was the guy, thanks to clutch sports or sometimes unclutch sports, however you want to do it, who pried Anthony Davis out of a contract in New Orleans. And New Orleans went out of its way to do everything it could to give Anthony Davis the help he needed to win, or at least be a viable contender, right? How about DeMarcus Cousins? How about Rondo? You have Drew Holiday. I could go on and on. They had a pretty good team a couple of years
ago. But Boogie got hurt.
Okay? But the point is, Anthony Davis says, I'm not happy. I want out. I want to go with LeBron. Right. I want to go to L.A.
Right.
And the New Orleans officials, after the fact, admitted we shouldn't have even kept him as long as we did because it got to be really difficult around here.
Yeah.
You know, it got to be ugly around here, right? Okay.
Because Dale Demps had dug in.
Okay. So the point is that the PER prince, who was Anthony Davis, he could flex his muscles enough to say, okay, I win PER a lot, but I don't win anything else. I want to go with LeBron and win a championship.
Right,
okay?
right.
So was he able to force his way out? You better believe he was.
After a year.
Okay, well, he forced his way out. Did my man Kawhi Leonard force his way out of San Antonio after a year? Yes, he did. Yes. He made himself do not invite.
Same scenarios I mentioned before Skip Bayless, and I see the same trend like I mentioned earlier this video. James Harden will be part of the Houston Rockets either by the trade deadline or by the whole season, and after falling that the next season, he'll finally get traded. The Houston Rockets, it's too early. They're too shook right now. They want to keep him. Training camp is already started. The games and the regular season is going to start in 2 weeks. They're not in any rush to trade him at all whatsoever. They're not in their emotional state to pretty much overturn and trade him. They're fine where they're at as of right now. It's going to be a bumpy season for the Rockets. They're not going to make the playoffs. There's going to be a lot of toxicity and chaos with James Harden, who's going to bring it upon them. Russell Westbrook is out of there. James Harden wants to leave. He needs to get out of there, and he's finally realizing this.
Him back. He made it so ugly in San Antonio that finally they just said, we have to move him.
Thanks to Tony Parker and Mondo.
Okay, fine. But he started it.
They didn't start it. You ought to be ashamed.
Kyrie Irving said, I can't take LeBron anymore. I got to get out. You got to do it. And Dan Gilbert said, okay, because he had years left. You didn't have to trade him.
Right.
And he dealt him, right?
But here's the thing. They had another deal in place that could have got Paul George, and Paul George was willing to come if LeBron was willing to sign an extension. LeBron's like, no, I don't trust Dan Gilbert, and I'm not signing no extension. So you do what you got to do.
Okay. Paul George, speaking of, till death did him part with Russell in Oklahoma City, right? We're here for the duration. No, you're not there for the duration.
And now he's talking about he want to be a Clipper.
Okay,
Skip, that
Clipper
was
for life.
He said the very same thing in Indy.
He did.
I want to be here. This is where I want to be. Boom. He goes to OKC.
Boom.
Oh, I love it here. We can do it here. Boom. Now he wants. So I'm trying to figure out, were you lying then or you lying?
All these players say that, and then they end up leaving. These players will also say that, hey, I'm not going to ring chase. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay loyal whenever they're young in their career. A couple seasons later, they can't get past in the playoffs or even far down the road. And then no worries, no problem. We always see them leave to join a super team or go somewhere else. This is not a surprise at all whatsoever. And even Giannis Antetokounmpo stated a couple days ago he wouldn't mind playing with LeBron James, Anthony Davis, or Kevin Durant, or players in that mix. But he's stating that they would have to come to Milwaukee. He also did state that he doesn't mind being a second or third option. So I believe him to where he wants them to come to Milwaukee, but it's still not going to shock me that he will leave Milwaukee to the Heat, Warriors, Mavericks, or in that picture.
Now,
Okay, so how can I condemn James Harden for his current strategy? It's the way business is
but
done
let me
in
ask you a
this
question.
league.
Okay, what is James Harden upset that he and Russ didn't work out? Is he upset that management made moves without consulting him? Because it seemed like Mike D'Antoni walked out the door and they didn't have. It's hard for me to believe, Skip, that Stephen Silas was first on their list after Mike D'Antoni walked out the door.
Supposedly,
I solely believe they set up Steven Silas to failure, as they probably knew, the GM and the owner probably knew in the background that James Harden and Russell Westbrook were requesting trades. And within that moment, Mike D'Antoni decided to leave. He knew what was in the works, if anything, big picture. I think they used Steven Silas as pretty much as a scapegoat to set him up for failure. Pretty much smiled at him, saying, "Hey, you're gonna run with Russell Westbrook or James Harden. Go get him. Put your thumbs up." But they knew in the background that those two were either out of there or something was going to blow up. Russell Westbrook is out of there. James Harden has this toxic behavior, and he's demanding a trade. Now you brought in some hobbled pieces of Boogie Cousins and John Wall, and there's no clear direction for the team. And Steven Silas hosted a couple of first practices in training camp. James Harden, your leader, is nowhere to be found. It's not a good look. But then again, don't be shocked if they fire Steven Silas the first season and then they trade James Harden out of there. Something along those lines.
they blessed him. Supposedly, he and Russ both blessed him.
And now both of them want out.
Well, they're both out. Yeah,
Exactly.
it feels like
okay,
it.
and so Daryl Morey, who was James Harden, who went and got James Harden.
He did.
And they maxed him out. Skip, there are not very many teams that max out 6 men of the year. And that's what the Rockets did. They believed in it. So I don't know.
We made USAA insurance for this season. When being a fan on a budget gets tough, our agents do the legwork so saving on auto insurance is easy. USAA. What you're made of, we're made for.
Look, it's going to be a very uncomfortable situation, but I'm going to hold on to him for a year, and I'm going to drive the price up.
Okay, here's what James.
Well, that makes zero sense. The New Orleans Pelicans did the same thing with Anthony Davis, and that was just wasted time. It was wasted player development, let alone it was toxic for your whole environment. So the Anthony Davis situation, they should have traded him ASAP. But a lot of organizations have an ego. They're petty and salty. So they won't do it until, a push comes to shove and they're actually on the fire to where they have to. That's what they did. They had to fire their GM. They had to bring in David Griffin from the Cavaliers, and then he finally made the move. The Rockets, same situation. They got a big ego and everything. So I expect them to keep James Harden for till the trade deadline, most likely till the rest of the season, and then they'll ship him off.
I was just thinking, I am entering my 12th season in this league.
Yeah.
Remember, KD was entering his 10th season when he said, I don't care what anybody says, I'm going to go join forces with those guys in Golden State.
But KD
and he has 2 rings to show for it.
But for everybody that talks about LeBron was a free agent.
He was. No, he did it the right way.
Kevin Durant was a free agent. He didn't hold anybody hostage.
But I just listed a bunch of guys who weren't free agents who just forced their way out. So here's James Harden. He's won 3 straight scoring titles.
Yeah.
He was the 2018 MVP. He led the league in assists in 2017. He says, I got all these accolades. I'm called revolutionary as a perimeter scorer, right?
Right.
And I don't even have, I can't see a ring in sight. I need a telescope to see a ring.
Correct.
Because I got John Wall and what's left of DeMarcus Cousins, and that's what the guys they had last year.
That roster was filled out by people that James Harden blessed.
Sure.
Daryl Morey, nobody's on that. Now, obviously, they've added some pieces since Daryl Morey is no longer the general manager, the John Wall, and I think there's some other pieces that's.
Minnesota in the first round and blew through the Jazz in the second round in 5-5. And all of a sudden, mounted a 3-2 lead on Golden State in the conference finals.
I'm going to end it off here. Skip Bayless is pretty much